Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get buggy with Dana. Yes, that's where I teach you all about the bugs, and maybe I don't teach you enough, maybe I teach you too much, and sometimes my information is irrelevant. But you're here, and you can't get to tying the fly until you know the fly. So, just going to go over a couple things in this segment called Getting Buggy with Dana. We're going to talk about when to fish it. We're going to talk about the history, if I can find it, a little bit of entomology, and how to fish it. And then hopefully as you tie it, a lot more things will make sense, especially with a fly like this. So feel free to ask questions in the comments. Tim will watch those as I do when he ties. And I'm just going to run you through the Film Critic fly. Some would say dry fly. Some would say the fact that it is called the Film Critic. It's because it's meant to sit in the film. Okay, the film. It's not meant to be a dry fly, and it's not meant to be a nymph. It's somewhere in between, which is one of the greatest secrets to catching fish, is when you learn how to fish those stages outside of the nymphs and outside of the done adult dry fly stage. And this fly can hit you up somewhere in between the before and the after. So we're just going to go a little bit about the origin, the entomology, how to fish, where to fish, and at the end, I'm going to slap you down with a little bit of a pro tip. All right, so the next slide here that we have for you is a brief history about it. And I just wanted you guys to know that Bob Quigley, a legendary fly tyer, designed the Film Critic fly pattern, and the Film Critic is a popular fly pattern that mimics a mayfly at its most vulnerable stage. And you can kind of read here the stuff that I just talked about, being that the Film Critic is stuck in the surface layer of the water. Super important because this is a super vulnerable life cycle of flies. And I talked about it last week, but this week I'm talking about it in the means of watching those dorsaline fish and not knowing what they're doing, because these bugs are somewhat caught up in the surface film, meaning they are stuck. We'll use that for the PG term, but they are stuck in the water. And so a fly like this will sit with that hackle above the water, and the bottom there, the trailing shuck, and you got a little bit of an adult thorax in there, and then you got some sort of an advanced upright wing. And then the copper wire gives you the segmented abdomen. So it's very cool that this fly has all those things, looking like a mayfly is coming out of the shuck. Tim, how's the questions?
Haven't seen much yet, except talking about whitefish. Can we keep them on the bow? That's a no.
Well, we don't catch them with this sort of thing. So remember, the Film Critic is designed to imitate various aquatic insects in the emerger state, depending on the color that you tie it with. And tonight's fly will be in that BWO green drake-ish kind of thing, the mayflies. All right. During this phase, insects are trapped in the surface film as they transition from their pupal or nymphal form or stage to adults. Trout often target these vulnerable insects because they're easy prey, and the fish don't often have to give themselves up. They just have to come in and just suck them underneath. And that's why you just see the dorsaline fin. Roger wants to make note that beer and food gave him a segmented abdomen.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so these flies don't move a lot. They're kind of stuck. Remember the word stuck, because that's kind of what emergers do. They are stuck in the water. So how would you fish it? Well, it's actually quite simple. You just present it like a dry fly, except if you do use some sort of loxa or floatant, you don't want to get the whole entire bug. You just want the top, the hackle, and the post, because that's the part that's going to be sticking out of the water. So if you can't see it, like my friend Bruce had problems last year, and that's okay, because what you can do is you can use other things, other flies, bigger flies, or yarn as sort of like a strike indicator. So you have an idea where the fly is, right?
That's a great tip.
And probably what I wouldn't do is use a giant hopper, right? Because these fish are vulnerable when they're at the surface, and although you might say to yourself, well, hoppers exist, it's still going to put a bit of a slap down on the river. So maybe just use a bigger caddisfly or something that has a bigger post that you can see it. And then you could tie this kind of like 14 to 20 inches off the other fly. So you got like a 2-fly system. And surprisingly enough, sometimes that bigger fly gets eaten in a situation like this because it's, oh my goodness, so different.
Bruce said it's called Euromidging.
That's what hashtag Euromidging is what we did last year. So where to fish it? Well, we just kind of talked about it in that slow, calmer waters downstream of the riffles and lakes and ponds. You will see a lot of this happening in more than just this fly, but the emerger state happens in lakes, and it's so frustrating. This can be one of the most frustrating things to fish, but now that you got the Film Critic, it's not. It's going to be just like, I did it. I figured it out, and you're going to send me a message here and say, I did it. So I think kind of sum up where to fish it is where fish are eating it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Easy point there. All right, and then we're going to kind of roll out of this and get ready to tie it up, so get all your stuff ready. Just a couple pro tips. Time of day, well, effectively during the hatches. So depending if it's like early morning, you're fishing PMDs, or if it's late afternoon, about 3:35 and the BWOs are coming off. If it just depends what you're, about 1 o'clock, the green dregs come off. So you got to know the hatch that you're going after.
Gary's got a good question here. So what would be some good alternative colors?
Yellow.
Yep.
I would do black.
Yep.
I would do black and a smaller. So the question was, what are alternative colors? Yellow, green, black, and tan. And don't forget the gray, because I don't think fish quite see the gray, just like the parachute Adams.
That's why it's one of the best colors of all time. It kind of matches a lot of things. Yeah.
And also, I wouldn't negate purple, because it's nothing.
A purple Film Critic.
Yeah.
The wheels are turning.
Secret tip there. Yeah. So there we go. We got olive, brown, and gray, which we just talked about. Popular colors, which my slide perfectly answered Gary's question, and he didn't even know it was coming. Wonder if that's all I got for you guys. No, it's not, because I got more pro tips.
But wait, there's more.
Energy efficiency. Okay, surface proximity. The two things that I want you to take out of this is fish don't want to expel a lot of energy to eat. If they can expel the least energy possible and still eat a lot, that's why they go after the vulnerable. Okay, they're kind of like a-holes like that. But this fly represents the vulnerable, and it's a fish energy saving protein source, and they love it. Also, that energy efficiency and the proximity and the vulnerability talks about where they are in the water column, which is right near the surface, but it's in the film. All right, everybody following along with me. Rise forms. We're not going to talk about it, but I'm just going to kind of leave you with those parting words of rise forms before we get into the poacher. But rise forms. You have to know your rise forms to know what the hatch is, because
what do you mean by rise forms?
I'll come back to that. I will come back to that.